I'm out here standing in front of my front garden bed, and as you can see, there is a lot of variety going on, and yet hardly anything going on all at the same time. Um, I built this bed just kind of on a whim. I had a bunch of 2 by 12 by 10s that I bought to make a shelf inside of my living room, and when we got the wood, it was pretty damaged. It wasn't doing too hot. It had all of these huge chunks taken out of it, and it just wasn't the prettiest wood. So I just went ahead, even though I know that it is wood that's made for indoors, I went ahead and made a garden bed out of it because I had compost and mulch delivered, and I just wanted to use it for something, and if I can't use it in the house and I can't return it, then why not? It's pretty much been raining here non-stop for 3 weeks straight, and the garden's just not doing well because of it. There's a lot of yellowing. Everything's yellowing. This is spicy Italian oregano, and it's one of the only things that's really not dying back right now. It grows pretty well in the shade to begin with. This is my sweet basil plant, and I planted the sweet basil. The whole point of planting it was literally just so it could seed all over this bed. I have so many different plants in this bed because I really want to have it reseed itself and grow and just fill the bed with different herbs and flowers and volunteer plants, tomatoes. I just love the look of gardens that have everything inside of it. And what I'm doing now is I'm just picking all of the really damaged yellow or dying leaves off of the sweet basil plant. You can see the rain and the weather just hasn't been kind to it. It's not doing too well. I really love sweet basil. I just grind it up into a pesto and use it in just about everything that I cook. But I like to save these leaves and feed them to my ducks or my chickens. They really enjoy them too. So I'm just picking off all of the brown leaves. Now the flowers are edible too. You can eat these, but I really want to let it seed and have little baby volunteer basil plants all over this bed. This bed is actually about 360 square foot, so it's way bigger than any other bed that I have in my yard. The other beds that I have are 4 foot wide by 16 feet long, and they're actually made out of pressure treated wood. So they're gonna last a lot longer than this bed. And right over here, I noticed that, there they are. There are actually a ton of baby volunteer tomato plants. And while I'm going to assume that they are from my cherry patio tomato. It's a dwarf patio tomato that I just bought from Lowe's because it was already producing tomatoes about 2 months ago, and we really just wanted something in here that'll produce tomatoes. It is a determinate type plant, and as you can see, it's already pretty much puttered out and made everything it's going to make. The limbs are dying, so all I'm really doing now is letting all of these little tomatoes ripen, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this up and place something else in its place. Now, I'm almost certain that that's why there are baby volunteer tomato plants everywhere. This one's almost ripe. They get a pretty red color, and they do have a tendency to crack open, but I wasn't really impressed with these tomatoes. Some of them were super sweet, and some were just like really bitter and kind of sour and just not pleasant, especially if you're not a tomato person. And luckily I'm a big tomato person, but my children and husband, they don't really like tomatoes, so this definitely isn't a plant that I would save seeds from on my own. But if they're going to volunteer in the garden, I'm going to let them. Here are all of our radish plants that we planted. They've only been here for about 2 weeks now, and they're doing pretty well. I just threw them in here because the seeds were really old. They were several years old. They were past the plant by date, and I just wanted to go ahead and get them out. I know that radishes do not grow well during the summer, and here they tend to get extremely spicy if they're not grown in the winter because it's so hot here and so dry during the summer. But these guys are doing pretty well, and even if they don't produce really large bulbs like most French breakfast radishes produce a several inch long bulb, these are pretty small. But their greens are really high in vitamin A, and I really enjoy the greens. They actually get kind of sweet when you cook them. And so I'll probably cook them up with some other greens. Here's one that the root's actually starting to plump up pretty well, but they're just not doing as well as they could because they are a winter plant and it is 80-something degrees out here today. Now, it's supposed to be raining for another, wow. It was only supposed to be raining until tomorrow, and now it's supposed to be raining for another week. And my Patio plants, they're not handling this weather well. I'm just really starting to set up, so we don't have the structures to cover our plants and a greenhouse and all of that. We're really showing you guys the beginning of what's to come and how we're doing things a little bit at a time. And we're kind of letting the garden speak for itself, and instead of doing it all at once, we're letting it develop over time. And I'm just picking off all of these yellow leaves or damaged leaves because I don't want the plant to get sick. Tomatillos are actually one of the easiest plants I've ever grown. I did a video 8 days ago and one recently of cuttings that I just took and I just stuck them into some compost. And all this is in here is mushroom compost. And on the bottom 3 or 4 layers, 3 or 4 inches rather, of it, I actually used black mulch and then filled the top with compost and planted everything. And these plants are doing really well. Even with all of the rain, they are surviving. And when the drought comes, they're still going to be producing a really good amount of tomatillos. And if any of the tomatillos fall into the soil, they'll reseed and they're just going to fill this bed completely up, which I really enjoy. This little guy here is a green zucchini, and I actually planted them all at the same time, and it has a lot of dead leaves. Now, they tend to, as the stem grows, the older leaves kind of tend to die and form new leaves, and I just pick the older leaves off because I don't want them to harvest any kind of disease or too many worms try and feed off of them. We tend to get vine borers pretty badly around here in the summertime. They're not bad in the winter, but in the summer it's just not fun. And you can see there's a lot of little leaf damage, and a lot of people would still leave these leaves. But I'm not going to because we have so many vine borers. The problem is with it being rainy though is that they could potentially, insects or borers, even worms, can tend to get inside of these and make a lot of scabs on the plant, and then they don't last very long in the heat. This year I went ahead and planted them underneath some trees that I had, hoping that even though they weren't going to get full sun all day long, maybe in the heat of the summer, they wouldn't die off from the extreme heat and the sun just blaring down on them. So it's kind of an experiment. Now, this little plant here and this plant here and all of these tiny little plants are all the same age. They're just not doing that well because of all the intense rain that we have had. So I'm just kind of pulling all of the leaves that are dead off. I'm not sure if these are going to do well and survive, but the upside is, although you can't tell yet, I'll update a video in about a week. There are actually a ton of green zucchini seeds that I just planted. I just planted an extra 2 packs, so probably like 40 more seeds. And I'm going to try high intensity growing all of my squash and see how they do throughout the summer when they're pruned. And here's a bunch of tiny plants growing up. I am really not sure what that is. I believe that it may be borage because there are a lot of borage seeds out here. that are starting to come up. There are about 100 borage seeds that were planted, and borage is pretty reliable. I really like it because it tends to attract aphids away from my tomato plants and to the borage. And borage is much more resilient than tomato plants, so if they get a lot of aphid damage or anything else, then they usually come back pretty easily. Whereas with the heat and the humidity here, if my tomato plants get a lot of aphid damage, they're pretty much done for. And realistically, once late July, early August hits, my tomatoes are pretty much done for anyways because the humidity and heat so intense. Now, this right here is just a bluebonnet that I bought from the local grocery store, and it's pretty much died out. My son's favorite plants are bluebonnets, and you can see where it's actually produced one little seed inside of its seed pod, and that was it. And well, it's all that I found. It may produce more seeds, but you can pull the seed out of the seed pod and plant it back into the ground, and it does pretty well. And I cracked over the seed pod, and I'm just gonna dig a tiny hole and plant it about 1/2 inch deep, and it'll pop right back up. They do pretty well. Here's another plant that we just went ahead and we bought from our grocery store just to kind of fill in the space. And that'll get about 1 foot tall. I planted a bunch of California Wonder Peppers in, and this one is actually much taller than this, and it kind of broke on top. You may be able to see where it broke right here. And so it's had to really fight to come back, but these really enjoy the heat, and we've been dipping well below 65 every day, and with the rain, they're just not doing well. Everything's really stunted. I'm planning on getting some row covers for a lot more of my beds so that they won't have to deal with this next year if we have this much rain, but it feels like there's way more rain this year than there has been in previous years, and I've lived here for 5 years. This is also a California Wonder Pepper, and so is this. They're the same exact age and planted at the same time. This one's leaf is really bad off. And you can see there's some insects on it, and I just kind of smush them and grab them off. And if I find any caterpillars or anything like that on it, because we do have small chickens and we do have, here's another little baby popping up. I just go ahead and I feed all of the insects that are large enough and all of the caterpillars that I find. I just go ahead and feed them to the birds, and that way I don't feel like I'm just wasting anything and they're not out here destroying the food that I'm growing. Right in here I have a watermelon plant planted, and I'm going to be perfectly honest and say I don't remember what type of watermelon seed this is, but I planted it so that once they grow, and I have them planted in several places throughout the garden, as they grow, the vines take about 8 to 10 feet, and I'll have them running in different directions. I'll train them to grow in different directions, and what that's going to do is cover the soil and protect it from the sun's heat, and it's going to keep all of the water from evaporating and protect the roots of the plant. So hopefully it will not only suppress weeds, but the idea is that it keeps the rest of the plants hydrated and cool from the crazy high 90 to 100 and something degree weather. And here's another one. And all throughout this empty space, I have all types of herbs planted, whether it's borage, sage. They're all just kind of sprinkled in here, and throughout the year they'll start popping up on their own. And I also planted some more green squash down here. I want to say it's calabaza, but I don't remember. The whole point wasn't to save seeds this year. It was just to kind of get things going and experiment and enjoy ourselves and see what happens. Here I have a small tea rose. It's only going to get about 24 inches wide and about the same in height. The most they've ever spread out is about 4 feet, but I'm really hoping to save seeds from them and plant more seeds. And all you have to do to save seeds is at the bottom of these little roses, they have the head on them, and once the rose starts to die and dry, I let them dry on here if at all possible, and once it starts to do that, there are seeds inside of this little head right here, and you can actually pull them out. There's usually about 2 to 3 seeds. This is not a very large rose, as you can see. They are beautiful, but they don't get very big. And what I love best about these tea roses is they're actually food grade, and you can dehydrate them, which I love drying different flowers. And I dry them, and then I keep them in an airlock container, and whenever I feel like it, I either steep them to make tea, or I steep them and make tea, and then I have a jelly recipe, and I love to make rose jelly, and it just smells so good. Now, this poor rose plant actually has a lot of leaf damage from the rain, and I'm hoping it's just from the rain. Roses are prone to a few viruses, and so I'm gonna wait a few more days, let the rain kind of subside, maybe another week, and if this gets any worse, I'm gonna actually go and see what I can find, because I don't want this plant to be taken out, but at the same time I'm really careful about what I spray, because I do grow these plants for my family and we do consume them, and I'm just really careful about the type of food we eat and what kind of sprays we use. It can get kind of crazy kind of fast, and just makes me a little bit nervous. The tag on that one says it's actually a peach tea rose. So these are little carrots, and just like the radish seeds, I had a bunch of carrot seeds that I didn't even realize I had, because I have such a huge seed collection. I've had them for about 4 or 5 years. I believe that they said they were the sweet Devers, and they may be mixed in with some scarlet Nants, just because I have some of those. And they are only supposed to grow in winter. They're usually really hard to germinate, but these I planted about 2.5 weeks ago, and look at them. They've already popping up, and strangely enough, they're actually producing carrots. And that actually looks like a white carrot. I also threw a third packet of seeds of the carrots that are colored, although I thought I threw them down here at the end of the bed. As you can see, all of these are baby carrots. And even if they don't produce roots, I'm just going to eat the greens. I really like carrot greens. I think they taste really good. To me, they kind of taste like cilantro. And they're really good for you. So that's my plan. It would be cool if we can get some roots. Carrots are biennial plants, which means that the first year they produce roots and send up their green tops, and the second year then the tops all go to seed. And I have them all throughout here. I also have some basil, which I just got because I saw at the store it was $4, and I thought it was really pretty because it has these purple leaves on it, and I was just like, wow, that is a really pretty leaf. You can see it also has a couple of sad little leaves on here. And these are grass that's growing through everything. It is everywhere. I don't know how grass manages to seed so quickly around here, but it does. So here are all the zucchini plants. And in another week or two, this garden's going to look totally different than it does today, because more and more is going to pop up, and we're going to see just how much we can get in here and how closely, and hopefully next year see how much is reseeded. You can see there's a little clover growing in here, and here we have a Gerber Daisy. This is an orange Gerber Daisy. No, I take that back. This is my yellow Gerber Daisy, and it actually produces beautiful heads. We got it because my kids just thought it was pretty, and I actually really, really loved it. You can see it's kind of shredded. These also seed. I don't know if you can see, there's a seed. They're really tiny. And I'm just gonna let it pick out the dead leaves so it doesn't get any damage. One thing that I have known, even though this Gerber Daisy, you can see the new growth coming up. Let's see what the tag says. Yeah, it is a Gerber Daisy. It's some sort of mix, it says, and I have no idea what. I'm guessing it produces different colors, but I've only seen yellow on this plant. It does have new growth. One issue that I do have with the Gerber Daisy is that it's so hot here, and even though it's planted under a tree, and here's another little volunteer tomato plant. Even though it's planted under a tree and it's right by the watering hose, it just wilts so easily. If there's too much, it has too much full sun, it wilts. If it has not enough water, it wilts. And I've had watered them and then come out the next day and they'll be wilted because of the sun, but as soon as the sun goes down, it's not. So I'm definitely gonna have to probably move whatever Gerber Daisies pop up to a new location once we're in better conditions to move them. I don't want to move them now with the amount of rain we have because it's kind of established, and I don't want to move it to a spot and end up holding too much water or just doesn't get its roots down, and then it's stressed from both the rain and from being moved. Now this is actually curly leaf it's curly leaf parsley. And when I first started growing, it actually looked a lot like cilantro to me, and honestly it tastes a lot like it too. But all of these pieces that are just yellow from all of this water and from the rain splashing up and the dirt splashing up, I'm just gonna pull them out. And you can see it still has some new growth. Just about 2 weeks ago, this was actually a really tiny plant. It was just like a couple of pieces like this stuck into the ground, and now it's growing so quickly. It's got to be about a foot wide, even though it doesn't look like that, and a good 10 inches tall, and it just spreads out. And I haven't grown this particular variety before, so I don't know how it's going to seed or how well it's going to spread, but I do know that I like that it kind of tastes like cilantro, and I like the fact that it's growing really well, even though it's been unpredictable weather and rain, and it's been crazy hot during the day and super cool at night. We're already reaching 85 plus degree weather, and it is not even June yet, so I can't imagine what summer's going to bring this year. This is my mint plant, and this is a chocolate mint, and it tastes and it smells just like an Andes mint. I highly recommend, if you see it, get it. I bought it from H-E-B, which is our local grocery store, 3 years ago, and I had it planted in a part of the yard, and I thought that we killed it because we ran it over with a lawnmower, and I saw a used section of it growing back, so I just grabbed some of the roots and I planted them over here in the garden, and it's really taken off. And I have another one here, and you can kind of see how it spreads. It just sends off little pieces and shoots all over the place, and then those root, and it just continues to spread. Now, the one thing about mint that you really need to know is if you plant mint once, you're going to have mint forever. So make sure that it's something you want to commit to, because it's going to take over everything. It's going to find ways to reseed in your grass, and I love it because I like how it's invasive. It takes over the grass, and that whenever I mow, it smells like Andy mints all over the yard, and for me, that is a lot of fun. So this is kind of what it looks like now. There's a lot of barren spaces, but come a couple more weeks, as more stuff pops up and takes over, this is going to look like a totally different garden bed. And there's so much space to grow in. So I'm really hoping that it continues to fill up and do well. these tomato plants are actually my only tomato plant, but that are not just doing poorly. They're a San Marzano tomato plant. They are an heirloom, and they're used most often for canning, making sauce, or drying, and I love that about them. This one does have damage because of the amount of rain we have, but these are going to bounce back so much faster, and I really recommend these for cooler climates because okay, I'll be right there. My 3.5-year-old wants me. And even though it's been cool here and rainy, we have tomatoes already, and this plant's going to grow another 2 or 3 feet tall. They are indeterminate, which means they'll continue to grow and produce throughout the season. And they will produce a little bit longer than our other plants that tend to get hot easily, but they're just not going to grow for more than another 2 months. But I highly recommend them if you want to get plants earlier out in the spring. These have not been protected from the rain. They haven't been protected from the constant cold spells. And they do have some yellowing, but they're just not that bad. And I haven't really pruned them. Pretty much the pruning I'm doing now is all the pruning I've done. So they're doing really well. And it'll only be about another 1.5 to 2 weeks before they really start producing. And when I don't have enough tomatoes, I just go ahead and I take the core out of the top of the tomato, which is the part where it connects to the stem, and then I just stick it into a Ziploc freezer bag, and I stick them in the freezer. And that way, whenever they defrost, they're already decored, and the peels of the tomatoes just